What I know where we are. We are peaceful protesters. We just want to observe. Police are our friends. Officer, we just want to observe our procession here. We just want to observe the procession. We cannot pass here. You cannot observe anything. Officer, we have the right to protest. You cannot observe any procession here. Why do you say so?
All right, those are, the footages rather, of the commemoration, commemoration of fourth year commemoration of the Endsars that happened, Endsars protest, different protests around the country in 2020. And what you saw was part of what happened in Lagos, in which the police tried to tell some of those protesters to stand down. You could see them asking why. And these are some of the issues. Later, many of them were whisked away in the waiting vans of the task force of Lagos State. But by the way, you had my introduction before I went on that break. 4 years down the line, have we learned any lessons? What started like a call for, like an advocacy, later turned into a protest against the high-handedness of Special Anti-Robbery Squad, defunct Special Anti-Robbery Squad called SARS of the Nigerian Police. And later we learned there was a renaming, SWAT at the end of the day. But what has happened? Are we living the life that was supposed to be given to us by the advocacy from that particular protest? The men of the Nigerian Police themselves, are they well taken care of, even from within, so that they will have the kind of work, they can perform the kind of function they're expected to perform with decorum, with much responsibility, instead of some of this aggression that we see. To make sense of these more for us is one who was part of the movement, especially here in Osun State at the time. Comrade Ayo Ologun is a human rights activist and he joins us virtually. Comrade, good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right. And, what do you make 4 years down the line? Generally, let me just ask you, October 2020 to October 21 today now, 2024, what would be your assessment of the message that was tried, that was being passed at the time, and everything that heralded it, and the ruins after it at the end of the day, and where we are right now? 4 years down the line, has anything changed?
Well, it's been 4 years, and it's another time to commemorate the events that practically crystallized on the night of October 28th of 2020. I said crystallized because there were a lot of activities and events that led to that moment that we are commemorating. The Endsars was not just an October 20th thing. It lasted for about 3 weeks prior to that day, but that is the defining moment. That is the day the protest crystallized by the unlawful the dispersion of lawful protesters and killings of young Nigerians at the Lekki toll gate. It's been 4 years, and we are still nursing the wound. Like I've said on different platforms, the intention of those who started the call for the disbandment of SARS then, which eventually led to a protest, I'm sure this were not, what eventually turned out to be was not the intention. It was supposed to be a civil advocacy, which eventually led to a protest. Unfortunately, the protest took turns because of a lot of other interests that came into it. And then we all know the story, how lives were lost, how there were killings which the government denied, how over 100 people were arrested and incarcerated in different cells and different prisons across Nigeria. Some of them, I can confirm to you, are still in detention as we speak, just because they were victims, in court now, of what transpired in 2020, the month of October, which has been called Endsars. If you ask me, The highlight or the high point of that protest was the 5-for-5 demand. So if you want to judge the sources of that advocacy come protest, and you want to put into perspective how effective it has been, then you look at the 5-for-5 demands. Unfortunately, one of the demands that was put forward then was even the welfare of the members of the Nigerian police force. Unfortunately, a lot of them didn't see it that way. A lot of members of the Nigerian police force were not able to shed off the toga and the weight of being instruments in the hand of the state that they are still being used to be. So if you ask me, how much improvement have been made to the life of an average policeman? How much has their barracks improved? How much has their training school improved? How much has their salary improved? How much allowances have been carved out for them for inconveniences, for loss of life, for incapacitation, and what have you? That is an answer that all of us can answer in clear conscience. One other demand that was put forth in the Endsars protest was the disbandment of the SARS. Unfortunately, that too was not achieved, because if you ask me, of what essence is the changing of a name if the character and the personnel are not changed? The same people that formed SARS and became so high-handed, such that they tell you, I will kill you and nothing will happen. There were even reports of extrajudicial killings on their part in their different formations. Their office in Abuja and that of Oshobo was seen as a graveyard kind of sort. People get killed in the course of being tortured, and they get buried in shallow graves, some of them thrown into the canals and what have you. So if you ask me, are the personnel involved in that heinous crime, have they changed? Has there been a reorientation? The only thing we probably got was a change of name from SARS, Special Anti-Robbery Squad, to SWAT. So for me, that is also a failure, because the disbandment was not properly achieved. What they simply did was a change of name of the corps. Number 3 of the demands was the fact that policemen should stop, I'm looking for the right words to use now, unlawful arrest of young people, which there's a particular word for it, which escaped my mind, profiling. That's the word. Unlawful profiling of young people. The fact that you have dreadlock on your head and you have some beards on your cheek, and you decide to wear rag jeans, or you are putting on a canvas, or you decide to have your hair tinted. Erroneously, members of the police force assume you are either some sort of criminal or you are an internet fraudster. And there is no way in the world where anybody can be defined by how they choose to look, how they choose to dress. So one of the things that the police was fond of is the moment you are a young man and you are found behind the wheel of a good car and you have your hair tinted or plaited, or you have some beads on your cheek, or you are wearing some kind of phone cloth, or you are holding a particular kind of phone, you are simply profiled as an internet fraudster or a criminal of a sort. This was one of the demands that was put forward. That look, it is wrong to profile anybody by how they choose to look. There's freedom of speech, there's freedom of movement, and there's freedom of association.
Right.
So, if you ask me how much of that has been achieved, I will tell you that if it has not gotten worse, maybe it has not really gotten abated. I've had reasons to stop on the highway to intervene in such matters, even when it's none of my business, like Nigerians will say. Or maybe the man in me will not let it go. I've had to intervene on several occasions when I see young boys, young ladies dragging it out with policemen on the road because they were being unjustly profiled for what they are not. Another thing that we also saw then was this unlawful infiltration of individuals, unlawful access to people. You stop people on the road, beyond asking that their vehicles be searched, you demand for their phones, that you want to check their phones for what God knows what. Of course, that perhaps has been achieved to a lot, some extent, because people are now becoming aware. I've seen cases where policemen are dragging with people on the road and they look, let the heaven fall, I will not give you my phone because it's my property. I have the right to privacy. But before now, a lot of people get brutalized by the police for that unlawful infiltration of their privacy. So by and large, it depends on the prism by which you want to look at it. A lot of achievements, or let me say a few achievements, were made by the Endsars, because of course, one thing that the government realized after then is that the norms cannot continue to be the norms, that the will of the people cannot be taken for granted. But perhaps apart from that, we had also a lot of shortcomings. Unnecessary lives were lost, properties destroyed. We became carnivorous at a point. You see, young people kill policemen, burn them, and even eat their skin alive. So it depends on the prism by which you want to look at it. Some successes were achieved, but of course, we have a lot of shortcomings occasioned by that protest of 2020.
All right. We'll come to the ruins in a short while because we're talking about the lessons. If actually we've learned anything significant as a people, the institution, the police, and the government as well, especially the response. Comrade, if you remember, I think you do, that there has been this call, and many persons online, persons of influence, social media influencers, comrades, have been telling the government to say, respond to these people. Come out. Governors, the presidency, leaders, respond to them before everything boomerang. And, the president at the time, President Muhammadu Buhari, was practically forced before he addressed the nation in what many persons will say is rather he wouldn't even have said anything at all, because all of them were in, it appears like all of them were in their cocoon before that protest started. And, some of these governors later come out. Governor Itola in Osun State at the time came out to address after the protest had started, and his vehicle was even, was being vandalized at some point. Jide Sanwo-Olu came out, Seyi Makinde came out. Many of these governors later came out, but they have been called before that time to say, leaders, come, address to these issues. By the way, before we talk about that, the 5-for-5 demand, let me just read it out and to juggle the memory of some of our persons watching, said, number one, immediate release of all arrested protesters. That's number one. Number two, justice for all deceased victims of police brutality and appropriate compensations for their families. Three, setting up of an independent body to oversee the investigation and prosecution of all reports of police misconduct within 10 days. Number four, in line with the new Police Act, psychological evaluation and retraining to be confirmed by an independent body of all disbanded SARS officers before they can be redeployed. Now, increase in police salaries so that they are adequately compensated for protecting lives and property of citizens. Now, you've addressed some of them, and it appears till now some of those things are not being done. So with this, on one hand, secondly, comrade, the response to the call being made by young persons. In fact, there was a situation in Oshogbo. I think that was when people hear, the way we say it, that was when they vexed. That's when they got angry of the hot purchase of a particular individual, in which police said, or two individuals or so, in which police later said they were fraudsters. And people are saying, even if they were fraudsters, must you give them a pursuit and you run after them in a car till they died? And I think that was what was this, the nail on the coffin of that particular thing in Osun State and many other places. The situation in Ogbomoso, the student, loudest student that was killed. But all I'm saying this morning is the response to call by the people, because we are talking about lessons, that the moment citizens, young people, old people are talking about a particular thing, what is the response time of our leaders? Has it improved? Comrade.
It has improved, I must tell you. But it has improved because they were practically forced to learn some very dire lessons. I can confirm to you that things would not have gotten as bad as it turned out to be in 2020 if our leaders had been responsive and responsible.
Yeah.
With due respect to many of them, they are accidental leaders in office. They are people that are not even fit for the public space. They are people who, rather than serve the people, are living like some kind of thing god over them. After the time the Endsars protests, everybody, including those in corridors of power, assumed it is another jamboree, or it's another set of unserious people who are just occupying the street. In another 2-3 days, they'll be fed up and it will fade out. That was the kind of impression that they created. That was the kind of insinuations that our leaders were getting, until the whole thing took a different dimension, and it became clear that if these things are not better handled, this might turn into a war that the country will not respond may not recover from. So because they lost time, because they failed to do the needful, because they failed to respond at the time that it was most gracious, they were left out of options. They lost options because even the first 2-3 days of that protest, governors, ministers, the president that addressed the nation assured young people there's a likelihood that the temple will have been brought down. But many of them did not respond until the 6th, the 7th, the 8th to the 10th day. By that time, they were left with little or no option because the people that they will have addressed and they will have listened were already done with them. They were not ready to listen to them. The option of negotiation was no longer on the table. And that is why the government had to resort to force, which eventually violated the rights of every Nigerian by being unlawfully killed. And this is what we talk about leadership. Serious, responsive leadership should know that peace is a catalyst for development. And when there is anything, no matter how minute it looks, no matter how minute it sounds, there is a need for an immediate response to ensure that that does not get out of hand. Perhaps it is the lesson learned within that period of the Endsars that made us to have what we had during the end bad governance. Don't forget that when the end bad governance of August 1st was declared, the government were over each other, calling for meetings with stakeholders in the society and the young demography. They were doing advocacy on radio, on TV, trying to explain what the government is doing, why protests should not hold. Eventually, they said, oh, if the protest must hold, it must be within the confines of peace and all of that. That is part of the lessons learned from 2020. And that is why they looked a little proactive in the August 1 end bad governance protest. But this is what we are saying, that leaders should be creative, leaders should be responsive. You don't wait until the citizens begins to attack people in office. You don't wait until the option of peace is no longer available before you attend to issues. They will hear issues that needed to be attended to, explanation given, and alternatives offered. But you hear those that are surrounding governors say, oh, Your Excellency, don't mind them. They are just a bunch of people that don't like you.
Yeah.
They are the opposition. Oh, there are people that don't want you. These are kind of things you hear, and you wonder the sensibility and the understanding of the purpose of office that these leaders occupy. No issue at all should be trashed, except investigated and found out to be otherwise. When issues are brewing, it is the duty, responsibility of a responsive leader to give the necessary explanation when demanded. But what do you get? The House of Assembly has become so arrogant. Those in the executive have become so nonchalant. They've put on the toga of arrogance such that when you ask them to even give account, when you ask them to even respond to questions, they whisk it away and say there's nothing they will do. Until EFCC begins to run after them, ICC begins to run after them, they'll be looking for who wrote petition. How does that person get to withdraw the petition? Yoruba will say, one palapalapa. That is about government. You also asked a second question, which has to do with those who were involved in the protests. How did we get to that level? It's important for history purpose, for people listening and watching us to know. I said it at the earlier part of this discussion. I was part of a few people across the country that started filing petitions against SARS as far back as 2016, 2017. Segalink, Yemi Fash, myself, and a lot of people, we have records of petitions we've written to the then IG of police. For me, I can speak for myself. In 2016 particularly, alongside Dr. Joe Dumaki and a few other leaders of thought, I was part of a team sponsored by the United Nations to train these members of SARS, as it was then called, on human rights violation. I was to coordinate part of the South-South. I was in charge of Rivers, Cross River, and Akwa Ibom. I coordinated the team that had a 3-day training for them. And by the time we finished that 3-day training, I knew that Nigerian police force is in a mess, which is looking unredeemable. I will give you one of such instances. On a particular Friday, the training was supposed to be a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. They all came from different states in that zone. After the training on Friday, they were supposed to go back to their hostels to their hotel rooms, have dinner, and sleep. After about an hour, we started hearing noise from the hotel that we were. It was becoming so deafening that myself and 2 members of my team had to find out what was going on. And we discovered that right in the front of the center where we were training them, these officials mounted a roadblock. Don't get it wrong. These are people, officials of the Nigerian Police Force that are not even of that state commando. The next thing they did was to mount a roadblock in front of their training center to be extorting motorists. When that was not enough, they took a bus, went to a place where commercial sex workers were working, packed as many of them as possible into a bus, brought them to the training center where they were being accommodated to be molested. It took our intervention. Then we asked ourselves, out of 3 days training, we've done Thursday and Friday, and they could still have the audacity by Friday evening to do what we are saying is unlawful right in front of us, right to our nose. It tells you that grammar will not do it. It tells you how almost irredeemable that arm or that unit of the police force has become. That was when the petition started. So when you are now trying to help a people who does not understand that they need help, it's a very terrible thing. Part of the 5 for 5 demands you read out states that salaries of police officers should be reviewed in such a way that their take home can actually take them home. We're not talking about psychological evaluation. But when you talk to an average police officer now, they see themselves as an agent of state that does not need to be catered for. How do you expect that a man that lives in a near toilet situation and called it a barrack will be in the right sense of mind not to see somebody who lives in a mansion in a clean environment as a fraudster?
Yeah, comrade. Yeah, you know, because of time, I still have like 3 or 4 questions for you. Let me start the line in this way. We'll talk about the Human Rights Index even now. What was it before? What was it now? A particular platform, Freedom House, you know, made a ranking, and it's 2 factors were used: political rights and civil liberties. According to Freedom, that is in 2024, as of now, political rights, according to that platform, was put 20/40, and civil liberties was put at 24/60, and the total in Nigeria, according to that platform, is 44/100. And by their own rating, they rated Nigerians to be partly free, 44/100, using political rights and civil liberties. That on one hand. Yesterday at the commemoration, we played that video earlier. You know, some of these protesters were waylaid on the road. Some of them were still arrested, you know, and put inside the waiting van of the police task force, and maybe some of them were later arrested. Speak to the Human Rights Index, like in a minute or so. Has it improved? And if actually we've learned anything, protesters were only carrying banner, nothing. They were waylaid by policemen with full gear, and they were arrested as well, and some of them were later arrested. The Human Rights Watch as of now.
I don't know the kind of arithmetic or the kind of statistics that whoever did the rating and said we are free or we are fair is using. Because if I can use the little knowledge of mathematics that I have, if you scored 44/100 in an exam in an higher institution with your tests are put together, what you have simply gotten is maybe a D or a E. So how do you say that somebody who got a D or a E, not even a D, I think D stands from 45. So if we got 44, that is a pure E. So how do you tell me that someone who had an E in an exam is doing fairly? It simply shows that we are below average. It simply means that we failed the Human Rights Watch or the Human Rights indices of what freedom should be. That is the absolute truth. So I don't believe that we are doing any good. We are not doing well at all in terms of observation of human rights and the protection of such. And let's speak to yesterday. What we're talking about yesterday is not what I watched on TV. It's not what I read in the newspaper.
Right.
It is what I experienced. I was there until the PRO of the Nigerian Police Force Lagos Command had to tell me to leave. And that is talking about one day. I was supposed to be part of that commemorial yesterday. And with other comrades, we were there when the police swept in and started saying that protest cannot hold. I was there in two capacities. I was there as a leader of thought in the society. I was also there as a journalist. So when it was becoming something else, I asked my crew to cover every part of what happened. But of course, a number of senior police officers in Lagos State are familiar with me. I got a call from one of the top officials to say, man, leave that place, because it will not be funny. If you get brutalized, we know what it means. We know how much of news it will make. At the point, an official walked up to me and said, okay, why are you here? Are you here as a journalist or as a protester? I said both. Because first and foremost, I was a Nigerian. I'm a Nigerian, rather, before I become a protester. And a lot of other things played that I had to leave. I left that scene for Oshobo yesterday evening. I got in very late at night. And what does this tell you? It simply shows that we have not learned very serious lessons. In the United States of America, the Osama bin Laden attack, do they still not mark it? Do they still not hold memorials every year about that event? So why should we not realize that October 2020 was one of the lowest moments in the history of Nigeria? So if people, young people particularly, decide to commemorate the day that they lost their colleagues to the high-handedness of the powers of the state, shouldn't the state be more remorseful than they turned out to be yesterday? I would have expected that even the state government, the Lagos state government or the federal government, would have been the one to put together an event to commemorate that incident. Put up a statue, let the governor come there to apologize once again, accept that whatever happened then was something that they probably would not have done otherwise, accept their culpability, apologize to the families of people, assure them that there will be better protection, assure them of different things. And perhaps yesterday will have been a more glorious day for everybody to remember. But yesterday was not an exemption. Year in, year out, that is the way that's been. 2021 and the 2022, for every year when that commemoration is holding, what you see is a further and reenactment of police brutality. And it's quite unfortunate.
Quite unfortunate. You know, one would easily say that the kind of a people or government that will come and apologize or do a statue or have the names of people that were affected written the way it was done in New York during that bombing of the Twin Towers will be only a people who have accepted that something wrong was done. Many of the state governments, even the federal government, with what the military did, never accepted that anything wrong was done. They said they did what they had to do. So a kind of person like that will never come out and say that. But because of time, we wouldn't have this conversation without talking about the ruins that followed the Endsars. You know, the carnage that followed after it was hijacked, the destruction of wanton lives and properties, businesses were touched, razed, people, some hoodlums, you know, went into shops, vandalized, took things from the place. Many mega stores, retail stores were vandalized. People stole, or let me say hoodlums stole. Police stations were razed to the ground. The Obas Palace in Lagos was desecrated. Many, you know, units of BRTs were destroyed. The Igbo Shere Court was burned down. TVC Communications headquarters was burned down. Many things that we cannot count. And, you know, that is the reason. Maybe that's the reason why many Nigerians, whenever they hear the word protest, we say, never again. How do we associate the ruins that follow the Endsars protest with the real intentions? Will you say it was worth it at the end of the day? Or it was a bad call, ab initio?
It wasn't a bad call. It was a good call, badly managed. And all of these ruins that you have talked about put the blame at the doorstep of the government. If I don't know of any, apart from being one of the leaders of the protests in Osun, I also was on the national platform where some of these protests were coordinated with Yemi Fash, with Showore and the rest of them. And I can confirm to you that day in, day out, every night when we have a review, it does not always end well, because there were also pictorial of opinions that does not align with the intention of some so-called leaders of the protest. But let's leave that. That will be another history for another time. Maybe if I ever get to write a book, some of these things will be revealed in it. But let me tell you, all of that ruins are traceable to the doorstep of the government. At the point that government should have been responsible in engaging the protesters and assuring them of understanding of their requests and their demands. What some governments rather did was to employ non-state actors to either infiltrate the protesters or attack them. If I don't know of any, I know of that of Osun. Actually, Eniba, as he was then called, was a small god that was useful in the hand of the government for all kind of atrocities. They were paid.
This is a strong allegation, comrade.
There are no allegations. Let anybody come and tell me otherwise.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about what was reported to me. I'm talking about what I was part of and witnessed.
Right.
At one of our gatherings at Olai, I can't remember which particular day of the protest, as we were gathering to write things on papers to agree on the route we're going to take, who is going to address for the day, who is taking record, who will be responsible for welfare and all of that. They swarmed in on us, beat the hell out of those of us that were then gathered. Some were macheted, some got wounded while trying to escape. I remember that I ran like I've never run in years, that particular morning. That was before 7 a.m. And these were people that did not cover their face. They are people that we know. Some of them came back months, weeks, years after to say, Egban, we are sorry because we got to meet on other platforms. But they had to do what they did because that's the instruction.
Must go, comrade. Yeah.
So how do you explain that peaceful protesters were infiltrated and sponsored to be attacked by hoodlums, non-state actors? So it is in reaction, in most cases, to such unprovoked attack that you began to have such looting. The protest was still very much under coordination until the non-state actors were introduced into the whole thing. Yeah. As much as I stand here again this morning to condemn all the forms of arson that took place, the killings, the stealing, the burgling, I commiserate with those who either lost their life, lost part of their bodies, lost their businesses. As much as I stand opposed to such unnecessary actions, I again blame the government for using non-state actors to fulfill that which they are being paid to do.
Exactly. And, you know, many Nigerians, especially in private capacity, will never forget what has happened. We hope this spurs us.
Most of people will never recover.
Yeah. And we hope this spurs us as a people and as a nation to always do what is right, especially when there are concerns about that. Human rights activist, journalist, and of course, public affairs analyst, Comrade Ayo Logun. Thank you for your time this morning. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
All right. These are the issues as well as a people. The moment there are concerns, let people in power trust the people they govern on. Let them respect them enough to respect their opinion and swing into action and show them the workings about what they are doing so that we avert some of these disasters. By the way, this will be the first leg of the conversation. We'll take this quick break. And when we return, we'll be talking about another thing entirely that has to do with politics, a bit of, you know, gathering of like minds for a particular purpose. Is going to be a very exciting one. Stay with me.